Thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking with everyone today about food and mood, the gut-brain connection. But first, we're going to do introductions so you know who's doing the presenting today. I am Lindsay King. I'm a clinical psychologist at the Peace Health Riverbend Hospital in Springfield, Oregon, and I work in the Bariatric Surgery Center. And I will let Amy do her introductions.
Hi there. I am Amy Gruber, also a clinical psychologist. I work in specialties, which includes our bariatric program up here in Vancouver, Washington, and the Salmon Creek area.
All right. So yes, like I said, we are actually going to be talking with you guys today about food and mood, the gut-brain connection, going over the ways that different foods affect our mental health more than the physical stuff. We'll touch on that a little bit, but today is going to be mostly about the types of foods that will help or work against our mental health. And here we go.
So the general overview for today of all the areas we're going to touch are food and what we crave, and mood and emotional eating and how that plays a role, as well as the reasons why we crave or eat. We're going to talk a bit about the gut-brain connection, which is a really important element for us to understand, and inflammatory foods, what they are and what they do, as well as feel-good chemicals for us. And, we're going to summarize self-care and coping skills. We've talked about this in a previous webinar, but want to be able to kind of recover that area again. And then the good news, how food can work for us, as well as offering resources that you might want to check out for yourself to support you in the process.
All right, so let's jump in. So, food, what we crave. So, when we're talking about craving, we are mostly talking about the foods that we eat for the emotional purposes. And usually, if someone is craving a food for an emotional reason, we're going for foods that seem comforting. And some of these include, obviously, I realize that this is not an all-inclusive list. So, some people are going to want things that fall outside of this. But normally, we're wanting something that's either sweet. So, your chocolates, your candies, your cakes, your pies, your baked goods, all those. Or some people will talk about the fact that when they're really stressed out or upset or even celebrating, that they'll want salty, savory foods. So they might want like chips, pizza, bread, pastries, that type of thing.
So, when we want to talk a bit around like mood and emotional eating. Like, what does that mean? What does it look like? So what it means is really when a person consumes food to regulate or soothe their emotions. It's like a way to kind of tend to yourself. A lot of people use food for reasons other than hunger, and we'll talk about this in just a moment on the next slide. But for the most part, we just want to kind of help you understand that when you're using food for emotional purposes, people tend to eat or crave refined carbohydrates. Those are the foods that we just talked about in the previous slide. And the problem with these food types is that they're inflammatory and they can lead to increased struggles with the very feelings that we're trying to soothe. We're going to talk about inflammatory foods later in the webinar, but here we are having these emotions that are leading us to crave these certain foods that are then kind of perpetuating those exact emotions that we're trying to kind of avoid or tend to by eating the foods.
All right. Hey, so again, moving into the reasons why we crave and eat what we do. So, as we've said a few times, many of us crave and eat for emotional purposes. And those purposes can include both positives and negatives. So, people will come in and talk about they'll eat when they're bored, they'll eat when they're sad or depressed or grieving, they'll eat when they're anxious or stressed out about something. And they'll eat for the positive stuff. So they'll eat to reward themselves for getting through the week or through a project. They'll celebrate with food. A lot of our social things that we do revolve around food. So we eat for a lot of reasons that are not about physical needs. And sometimes this is not a problem. I would say, if someone does this every once in a while, it doesn't necessarily lead to negative consequences. What I hear the most from patients or clients is the idea that they're doing it more and more often, and then it becomes a problem. So why is it a problem? And let's jump to the next slide and let's find out why it's a problem. If my cursor will work. There we go.
So the gut-brain connection, this part feels like such important information. Um, Your gut affects not only how your body feels, but it also can affect how you feel in your mind. Researchers have found that the foods that we eat have the ability to impact the following areas: anxiety symptoms, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism spectrum disorders, trauma related issues, dementia and brain fog, insomnia and fatigue, bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, and our libido. So there is this really important connection. It's kind of like they call our gut our second brain. So it's important to kind of understand that there is a very strong relationship between what we feed ourselves, the fuel that we're putting in, and then how it impacts our brain functioning, and then how it impacts all of our behaviors and emotions and so on and so forth.
Definitely. And I don't know about you, Amy, but I'd heard a lot about different foods and different menus for people that struggled with autism spectrum disorder. I'd heard about it for um, kids, like parents who were talking about their kids that had like ADHD type
Yep.
symptoms, the attention deficit or attentional issues,
Yep.
where they would play around with some of the nutrition or have like, and some of them not even play around with it, very like regimented. I was not aware of a lot of the research and the connection with a lot of these other types of disorders, and that, or, dementia and brain fog, insomnia and fatigue. Like it just, I was not aware that there was such a connection and that there was research being done in all of these different areas when it related to mental health. So, when I was doing the research for this, I was learning a lot of stuff too, which I think is great to then share with all of you, because if I didn't know it, I'm in the mental health field, I'm guessing that a lot of people were not aware of it too. So definitely getting this out there and helping people figure out that maybe what they're drawn to is not what's really going to help them long term.
Yeah. And I think the truth is that they're still doing a lot of research. I feel like we're still learning about these areas and the way that the things that we eat can impact all areas of functioning, and the connection between the gut and the brain and how it impacts, like mood and attention and like all the other areas, like cognition, all of that. I feel like it's such a deep, complex field.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
All right. So just to continue the gut brain connection a little bit more and give you a little bit more of an idea of what is actually happening. So when we feel stressed or upset, our body produces and releases a chemical that we call cortisol. This chemical is a warning signal that we are being threatened in some way. Now, way back, a very long time ago, when our body actually produced this chemical, it was a great signal to keep our ancestors alive because they were always in danger. And so it was a wonderful thing in the body. It kept them alive. We're all here because it worked very well. That's how I look at it. Today, though, we feel stressed for very different reasons than what our ancestors did. We're not always in imminent danger. Sometimes we are, but for the most part, when people come in there talking about their everyday stressors, they're not telling me about things that would be an imminent danger to their survival. It's more some of the stuff that I put up here, traffic, getting into fights with your loved ones or your friends, work. A lot of people have very, very stressful jobs, finances. And honestly, you can lay it onto anything that we're going through now. In our society, we've had a lot of stress in the last few years. The pandemic has caused a lot of stress. So people are experiencing stress and an increase of cortisol for these stressors that are here on the slide, but all kinds of other stressors too.
So inflammatory foods, we touched on that earlier, and really want to help you to understand what we mean by inflammatory foods. So as Lindsay was saying, like we have this increase of cortisol due to a stressor, like something that we perceive as a threat, that impacts our system. So then the brain sends us a signal to eat, whether it's to comfort or to soothe, de-stress, nurture, whatever it is. Um, so remember on the earlier slide, we spoke about like what we crave for comfort. So these comfort foods may make us feel good in the moment, but they are not good for us long term, as they can lead to inflammation both in the body and the brain. So what does that mean, right? Inflammatory foods have been correlated to psychological issues that we discussed earlier. It can lead to struggles with physical issues like arthritis, headaches, general aches and pains, fatigue, and more. So the inflammatory foods that we're talking about are refined carbohydrates, processed foods, fast foods, so sugary foods, salty, savory foods. And yes, these are the very foods that we crave and enjoy that we talked about earlier that can play such an important role in soothing us in the moment. We have a lot of associations, whether it's when you're feeling sad, there might be a certain food that you go to. When you're celebrating, like there might be a meal that comes to mind. When you're going to spend time with loved ones, it might be kind of focused around certain kinds of foods. So it's just kind of really important to increase our awareness so that we understand what the kind of draws are and like how they impact us.
Definitely. And just to, normalize this a little bit, it's people do, like we've said, people do crave different foods that probably they're trying to either decrease, avoid, if they are trying to get themselves healthier. You do crave those foods. I've, made the joke with many of my patients that I wish that when I had a stressful day, that my brain would send me that signal to eat a big bowl of broccoli. I love broccoli, but that is not what I crave when I'm stressed out. My body is like, hey, let's go for some pizza. Let's grab a burger and fries, tacos. It's never the idea of, not, I wouldn't say never, but many, many times my brain does not go for protein or some kind of fruit or veggie when I've been stressed out. So it's very normal to do this. It's more trying to think in line of what would work better for us. And that leads us to our feel good chemicals. So I'm going to do a very quick like breakdown or wrap up of what we've been talking about and then go into the feel good chemicals, because what your body is trying to do when it sends you those signals to eat when you're stressed out is to comfort and soothe and actually increase the way that we feel when our feel good chemicals are where we want them. So like we've talked about on the previous slides, something causes us to be stressed or upset. Our body is going to produce and release that cortisol. Many of us are going to crave something to decrease those feelings of stress. And many foods that we crave when we're stressed are inflammatory and lead to increased feelings of anxiety and depression over time. So the reason it's an issue is because it's not a long-term solution. It kind of gets you stuck in a very negative loop to try and feel better. So the way to do it to feel better, but without food, is finding new pathways, building new pathways that actually turn on our body's what we call the feel good chemicals. And so those are things like your dopamine, your serotonin, your oxytocin, your endorphins. And as Amy mentioned earlier, we have done some webinars that are related to self-care and coping skills for emotional eating that are ways to turn on those feel-good chemicals. And so if you have not viewed those yet, please take a peek at those, because those go into the self-care and the coping skills in a lot more detail than what we're going to cover today. But we are going to give you a brief summary of that just to give you an idea of some of the things that you can start doing for yourself that are not food related to start feeling better.
So here's that recap that we've mentioned. around self-care and coping skills. So coping skills is essentially just like a method or a strategy that someone's going to use to deal with or to decrease unpleasant emotions in the moment, as well as a way to nurture yourself. There are lots of kinds of coping skills. There's sensory coping skills where you're kind of tending to the five senses in the body. So a visual skill might be like walking in a pretty part of town, looking at nature, like using your eyes to kind of soothe or tend to or stimulate. Hearing. Using your ears, listen to music, or sing, or listen to a tape of the ocean, rain, something that is pleasing to the ears. And then smell, the olfactory system is a powerful one. So walking in the garden, in the woods, breathing in the smells of nature, like citrus can often be really stimulating. Peppermint can be really stimulating. Taste, like to stimulate the mouth and like the taste sense. And could be drinking a soothing herbal tea. Again, citrus is something that can be really enjoyable. Mint is something that can be really enjoyable. Touch, like that tactile sense. Taking a bubble bath or an Epsom salt bath and putting on your favorite comfy clothing. um, Touching something soothing, something kind of squishy or soft. um, there's also distraction behaviors, like when we engage in boredom eating, you can pretty much distract yourself with any activity because you're bored, right? So you're just looking for stimulation. So whether that's exercise or having some social time, going for a drive, whatever it is, something that's going to stimulate you, and engage your mind so that you're not bored and kind of defaulting to food to distract you from the boredom. And then, self-care. These are more long-term strategies that are focused on helping you meet your needs in a more overall way. So these are kind of regular habits that you want to be able to develop. So exercising on the regular, reading on the regular, listening to audiobooks, taking a class to engage and learn and stimulate your mind, getting out into nature. I know we've talked about this before, but there is so much research about the impact of nature on the brain. It's essentially like medicine. And then spending time with friends or loved ones. I mean, we are social creatures. We are wired for connection. So it can be another way to be able to kind of soothe, comfort, and nurture.
Very, very true. All right. Yeah. And, picking any one of these, to when you are emotionally eating or you're coping and soothing with food and you're trying to change that behavior, you don't have to try and develop all these things at once, right, Amy? It's the idea of maybe look at this and pick like one or two things that you think would work. Like we said, go and watch those self-care webinars or the coping skills for emotional eating webinar. That's way more inclusive, gives you a lot more of this information, and try and find the things that you think would replace the eating that you're doing, and especially if you are eating more of the inflammatory foods that we talked about.
I appreciate you saying that, Lindsay. And I feel like, just to talk about this is like this is a list of options, you don't want to inundate yourself and feel like you have to do them all. At home, I kind of made like an aesthetically pleasing little list by my bathroom mirror of just things that I can do to tend to myself, things that are instantaneous in the moment, things that I can do, like in 5 minutes, things that cost $5 or less. Just like options, like we need options. We like a menu of options to be able to choose from.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. Okay, so the good news. We've been telling you guys a lot of the stuff that deals with the foods that we love that is not great. Um, and so when we're thinking about this too, we do want you guys to be, thinking of foods that you enjoy that also can be very helpful for you and actually can improve your anxiety, your depression, as you can see on the slide, your sleep. And so what we did was we looked for, in our research, the foods that actually lead to improvement of mood as well as improvement in different physical issues. And we've come up with some of them for you. This is not all inclusive, but here are a few of the foods that work for us. And so this first little list is the depression, anxiety, more the mood, and it can be improved by the foods that you see here. We broke them down to protein, cheeses, veggies, and fruits. But obviously, it's just they're all different kinds of foods that are very, very helpful in improving mood. So as you'll see, I'm not going to read every single one of these, but as you'll see, there are lists of different types of foods that you can use that would help you with the anxiety and the depression. There's also foods on here that help with sleep. And if you notice, a lot of these are the same. So if someone comes in and says to me that they are struggling with depression, or anxiety and their sleep, which Amy, you can probably attest to this too. Many patients, when they're coming in, if they're struggling with depression or anxiety, they are usually struggling with sleep in some way.
Yes.
So if you look at this and you're like, well, if I'm struggling with these things, then there are a lot of these things that I can use, these foods that I can use and put on my menu so that, and increase them so that I can actually help myself, even with my nutrition, trying to help myself with my mental health and my sleep as well. Because for me, I would say that when my sleep is off, it does affect my mental health exponentially. And I'm sure Amy would probably say the same thing.
Yep, absolutely.
So the one thing that I noticed, I am a lover of cheese.
I'm with you.
Noticed that the only cheese that helps sleep is Swiss. But I thought about it and I was like, since most of us can improve pretty much anything and throw cheese on anything if you're a cheese lover, you could mix and match. You could do an omelet where you're having some eggs, you throw in maybe some spinach, or some leafy greens, or even some asparagus, I guess. I mean, and you throw on different kinds of cheeses. You could put cheddar and Swiss cheese together. So you could do a lot of these things together where you are putting a menu together with your mental health in mind. And the one thing to understand, and I tell patients this a lot, is when we're talking about different foods that would be helpful and there's a list of those foods, if you see that list and there's foods on there that you don't like, don't put those as a part of the menu that you're putting together. Most of the time when you see these lists, you're at least going to see a few things that you enjoy. So those are the things that you take so that you can develop a menu plan based on things that you enjoy, but also things that would help both mental health and physical. So really take away from this that we're not saying you need to eat every single one of these foods to be able to improve depression or anxiety or attentional issues or trauma issues or your sleep. We're just providing you an overall list that of some of the things that we work on with people when they're coming into the bariatric program of you really want to increase protein, you really want to increase your produce, your veggies, and your fruits. And this just kind of gives you that idea that there are things that could help you with your health and your weight related goals that could also help you on the mood side of things and the sleep side of things.
I mean, I love you look at this list and it's essentially like protein and produce. There's a whole new, blossoming field, nutritional psychiatry, which is really like dives into, like what Lindsay and I are talking about. And if you're interested, I would highly recommend Googling nutritional psychiatry because you'll find more foods that are related to more specific issues. You'll find more information about, like the gut-brain connection and how you can use foods, like as medication, so to speak, like in the basis of psychiatry to be able to improve, like overall like mental health.
Yep. Yeah. And actually that leads us right into the next slide with the resources. So I'm going to switch to that and let Amy lead us home.
Yes. So, if you do want to learn more for yourself, and I feel like information is power, the more you read and educate yourself, you're going to think of it. It's going to kind of be a part of your thought process, your decision-making process. So if you want to learn more about how food can affect, both your body and your mind, check out the Food Mood Connection. There's Happy Gut. There's the Psychobiotic Revolution, Mood, Food, and the New Science of the Gut-Brain Connection as well. And also, the whole field of nutritional psychiatry to check out as well.
Yes. And I did want to say, like to, piggyback off of what Amy just said, the Food Mood Connection that's written by Dr. Uma Nadu, she is actually a nutritional psychiatrist out of Harvard, and she is a trained chef. So in that book, as well as the Happy Gut book, they actually provide recipes to take some of these foods that they talk about in their books and allow you to start putting together your own menu plan or give you ideas of recipes. So check those out or find, like Amy said, Google it and find other resources for yourself that will help you learn even more about this because it's a growing field. We are moving in that direction to be looking at food to help us with many different aspects of our life. So definitely spend some time and learn a little bit more about that. And obviously, if any of you find yourself struggling with emotional eating or trying to decrease the inflammatory foods that we talked about today, please contact your bariatric clinic because we are here to be a resource to you. Thank you to everyone who is viewing and listening to us today, that you hung in here till the end with us. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you got some information that is helpful to you today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out for support, extra information, whether it's for us or, somewhere else that you feel like you get good support from. But yes, thanks for joining us today.